Hello, 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 and welcome back to another episode of Honky Talkin. I'm your host, John Carter, and we don't have to wait in the chat because Donnie C. Cutler is already here with us. How you doing today, Donnie?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, John Carter. Appreciate it. And I appreciate that shout out and fall back there to the good old days of the Honky Tonk Times lives.
Oh
It's
yeah,
a good
oh
good
yeah.
callback. I appreciate it.
That's how we found each other. Again, for anyone who doesn't know, it's fun to flip the table right now on Donnie because he was actually one of the first to interview me, if not the first to interview me about honky tonks, and now I get to interview him on some fun topics today. And so you might know him from Honky Tonk Times, but you also might know him just from his what country Cutler account where he does some fantastic posts. And that's why I actually brought him on today, is because he has such an interesting perspective. And if you haven't found time to be able to look into some of his writing, I highly suggest it, because his perspective is really good at picking up on the little things, but also still keeping it at a 1,000-foot view to talk about everything. But Donnie, I'd love to hear from you to introduce yourself to anyone who might not know you. Where do you find your experience? Who do you feel you are? Where do you find your place in the honky tonk?
Well, thanks. I appreciate being here. And yeah, it was all the way back in the Honky Tonk Times days when we started. Now writing for myself and a few other places. I'm a writer. I like thinking about these ideas and these big concepts within the country music space. Who belongs where? Questions of authenticity. What is real? What isn't real? Who gets to define that? Who gets to say their country? Who gets to say they like this music? I really love jumping all over gatekeeping, and that's something that we talked about a great deal. And that's something that I love to jump into. It's something that's I'm really passionate about because I'm not from the country. I'm not agrarian. I'm not a cowboy. I am a suburban Jewish guy from LA who likes country music, likes the stories, and likes the history. And I think I'm just as country as anyone else when it comes to this stuff because I feel like country music, this lifestyle, the concepts, the ideas, and the culture really is an American concept, and that should be for everyone to be able to enjoy, but also respect and understand. So that's something that I try to do, try to bridge the gap, right, between people who see country music as this secondary concept, secondary cultural expression,
Hmm.
and those who see people like me as interlopers who don't belong. And so I try to find a way to make sure that I can speak the language of the people who see this as something that isn't of value, and then I can speak the language of this culture and space in a way that they can see that people like me are of value, and the communities where we listen to country music that you know, aren't traditionally seen as hotbeds of country, are also just as country as they are. So it's about the culture, it's about the expression, it's about figuring out the history and understand where it's going.
Hmm. Anyone who follows both of us, and I would even say people who follow you and might have taken one look at my profile, are probably really excited to hear what we have to talk about because we both see that we're kind of two sides of the same coin, where we both are bridges. We both are looking to kind of, make that path of, what are these boundaries? What is this in the way of all in attempts to defer gatekeeping and leave that
Hmm.
out of the way. But we also come from very different backgrounds with very different perspectives, and
Hmm.
yet we find agreements in all of it, and we find uh, new knowledge through all. And so I hope anyone who doesn't know about either of us, though, who might have just come across this, recognizes that we both have an interest in agrarian culture, honky tonk music, and the like our culture as a nation as a whole and the world,
Hmm.
because it's all tied together in one crazy little rowdy group of folks, which you got to learn about, and that's what I'm interested in jumping in first. Is
For
coming out
sure.
of LA, being used to that scene, which anyone from Texas who wants to instantly, go after and turn their ears off right now, as an Arkansan, seeing both Arkansas, Texas, plenty of other states, I'll tell y'all, settle down, settle down, because you'll soon learn that the robust scene that we have in places like Austin that still hold to very traditional ways of honky tonking, the ways that Hank Williams would have been proud to play at, the ways that Charlie Pride would have been proud to play at, they still hold true to that in LA. And so now that you've come and visited Texas, though, you saw some Fort Worth, you saw some Dallas. You even call it Planet Texas, which I love. Kind of reminds me
Yeah.
of Toy Story. It's a
Yes,
store I
indeed.
want to visit now.
Yeah.
I'm curious about what differences you saw, what you liked. You can even say what you didn't like,
Hmm.
and where you say those gaps need to be bridged right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I was in Texas not too long ago, and I've been to Texas a number of times. I met my wife at a summer camp in Texas, and that's where I started listening to country music. Was when I made that trek about 22 years ago to summer camp in Texas. And the thing that really kind of surprised me when I started listening to country music is that I always kind of did listen to country music. I always had some of that southern rock, classic rock stuff that was very, very much country music adjacent. I always really liked bluegrass, and I always really liked fiddle music, and I liked, mountain music, and I liked some of the stuff that it's based upon, English music, Irish music, Eastern European music, Jewish music from those periods and those places as well, where it came and mashed together in the Appalachians and the mountains and the rednecks and the hillbillies, and all that stuff came together to create what is now defined as country music. I listened to a lot of that
Hmm.
before I listened to country music.
Hmm.
So I've always really loved it, and I didn't know that I did. And when I came to Texas for the first time, I started listening to some of what was, exclusively Texas popular country music, not pop country, but popular Texas country music.
Yes, big
And
difference.
big difference. And my gateway drug, no question about it, my marijuana to my now black tar heroin addiction of country music was Pat Green. And
Hmm.
I always will love Pat Green because he was my entry point to the country music scene.
Yeah, it really comes at you like wave on waves.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. It just keeps on coming, and you get to go out to that dance hall. And we'll stop now. But the the opportunity came up that I had to be in Dallas for work, and it was during the rodeo in Fort Worth, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then I was like, I'm sure there's some great shows going on around town while I'm there. Let me see. And I was like, holy smokes,
Hmm.
Pat Green's at Billy Bob's. I gotta go. I gotta go. It was like the first huge concert album I listened to was Live at Billy Bob's with Pat Green, as is a lot of people's first big concert album that they listened to if they got into the music in the early 2000s or even a little bit before that. So for me, it was like an obvious choice, And in the interim, I dive deep. I have a library of books behind me that I've read. I write about it. I read about almost everything that's online within kind of the alt kind of traditional country music space. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I do this stuff all the time, but I had to go see Pat Green at Billy Bob's, and it
Hmm.
was incredible. And so I got the tickets to go. I went with some friends who were in town for the rodeo to play and have some fun. And we went and we got dressed up as we always do, and we put on our cool clothes and we shined our boots and we went in, and it was awesome. It was just so much fun. We danced, we two-stepped, we did our Western version, our California version of two-stepping, though we did progressive out of respect for the floor we were on, but we still did what we usually do.
There we
But
go.
the things that I think were most interesting, and I really loved it, I felt welcomed, I felt included, I didn't feel out of place, but that's because I chose to feel that way. And I was comfortable in what I was doing. I was wearing a 1980s ridiculous motorcycle jacket with, acid washed jeans and like white leather lapels and fringe. It was ridiculous, but it was like an intentional ridiculous because for us in California and in Los Angeles, when we say we're country, we need to show that we're country. We need to
Hmm.
we need to show up in pearl snaps. We need to show up in shiny boots. We need to show up in tight jeans or Wranglers that are pressed and looking good because people will see you as just, oh, you're a poser. And that's not what we're trying to do, and it's not a scene that we're trying to create, nor is it something that we would tell people who came in. But we differentiate ourselves. It's part of the culture here. And I didn't see that or experience that in Texas because it just is, right? Everybody's wearing their nice clothes. They're wearing nice button down shirts. They're wearing nice jeans. They might have a buckle on their belt. They might not. They got their nice boots on, but it's not, it's there's no element of cultural garb. It's just normal. And I think that was the biggest difference that I saw when I was experiencing it. And that's what I wrote about in that piece that I have up on my Substack, is about this planet Texas. There's a gravitational pull of Texas in its culture, its experience. The way you dress, the way you act, the way you speak in Texas is very different than it is almost anywhere else. Mm-hmm. There's and in a different story I wrote about Texas, it's almost an immaturity that they have about this sense of inferiority, that they're worried that people are going to be like, oh, Texas isn't the best thing ever. It's like, yeah, you guys are good. Like, you got good music, you got good food, you have a lot of questionable other things like your electrical grid. But like, there's a lot going on in Texas that is, you have so much pride and energy that goes into it that it's infectious and it's gravitational. You don't need to do anything to be into country music and country culture in Texas. You're just there. And that's not true in Los Angeles. There's so much going on here that you need to make those intentional choices to wear the pearl snap, to wear the cowboy hat, to wear the shiny, ridiculous boots, as opposed to the nice, just regular old brown boots that you normally wear. That's the biggest difference that I saw. Obviously, the number of people who would show up to a Pat Green show is a little bit higher in, say, Fort Worth than it would be in Los Angeles. But I think that there would be a lot of folks that would show up. There are Texans everywhere. And so I want to say that now. I don't want to have to go into the witness protection program after saying that you have an inferiority complex, but y'all know you do. So it's okay. We can move on from there. But that's what I'd see was really different. And I think that if we're going to feel comfortable bridging these gaps and talking across our nations, or at least across our communities that share very similar cultures, we need to feel comfortable with the fact that some folks are going to show up a little bit differently than you might, but still do so with respect and understanding and the desire to be part of it. And that's, I think, which was really clear when we were enjoying Fort Worth. We were enjoying Billy Bob's. I danced at the Longhorn Saloon, which was a lot of fun. There's just a lot of cool places to go and do cool things in all of these communities. You got to find them. You got to respect what's going on, but you also can be who you are, and that's something that I think is telling of the country community and of the honky tonk space. And it's important to me as someone who is an outsider to this, but someone who believes in the values of it to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's you. I think you picked the perfect week to come in, especially the perfect crowd at Billy Bob's. For anyone who doesn't know, again, growing up, I didn't really know about Billy Bob's, being from Arkansas. And yes, I am from Arkansas. It's the first tattoo I got when I crossed the border. Because in Arkansas, I would always shake people's hands. Hi, I'm John Carter. And they're like, hi, I'm from Texas. And I was like, fuck you. Why is that the first thing you say to me? No, like, you're in Arkansas now. And then they would always talk bad about my state. And then until they went up to that mountains up north, they were like, oh, I love Arkansas now. I was like, no. You chose your side. You chose your side. Stay there. That's fine. But being down here, I do take responsibility for everything you said, because I think there's a lot of proof in it. But speaking on Pat Green, Billy Bob's, we have here in Fort Worth. If anyone who's listening hasn't seen it, but has seen something like Urban Cowboy, Gillies in Houston is pretty much what Billy Bob's built everything off of. And now I would say pretty confidently, it's definitely the biggest honky tonk in the world that's open to the public, at least. I haven't been to every Gillies, but the Gillies I've been to in Dallas, the other legendary ones, no legendary honky tonks that I've seen that came out of Texas in like the 60s and 70s are open to the public anymore. They're all event venues. So Billy Bob's is this massive place with a lot of stuff to do. We even have bull riding in there. We have a massive stage. And my favorite thing about Billy Bob's is I spent $16 to see Jake Worthington. I got to dance on a massive floor, and I got to look over the balcony that goes down into the pit, which is at the concert. So I got to dance and have a straight view of the concert for $16. I don't know anywhere else in the world I can do that. And it's a fantastic place, but the crowd determines everything, because Billy Bob's is definitely, it can turn into a tourist trap. One particular is Josh Turner. I will never go to another Josh Turner concert. At least at Billy Bob's, I've been 3 times, and every single time, man, it's a different crowd than what you experienced,
Yeah.
because those guys, I have no doubt, I would say 80% of the crowd is probably over 30, and they knew who Pat Green was. They were there for a reason, and the other 20% might have been younger than 30 and like just kind of around or tourist. But in the end, I bet you fit in like no problem. And that's what I will say about Texas is that like everyone's different. Everyone's
Hmm.
different, and no one like it's one of those things. I think talking to your inferiority point is that I think the hardest part to get through people's head is those, it's hard to say, like those ranch hands that feel the need to prove that they're cowboys. And it's like, hey man, you can like anime. I just want you to know, like, you can like skateboarding.
Yeah.
You can still be country and like this stuff. Like, that's just who
Exactly.
you are.
Yeah, and I
So,
think that that speaks to the bigger point, right? Is that this is something that we talk about pretty regularly, and I think when you start looking at individual people, you see the differences in them and what they like, what they don't like. But when you start talking about groups of people, you get yourself into some trouble. And
mhm.
who should and shouldn't be at Billy Bob's is a really stupid conversation.
Yeah,
Because if you want to go, go. But don't
always.
show up and talk through the entire set, and don't stand on the dance floor. You know, don't bring a drink on the dance floor. There are rules that you need to follow when you're in someone else's house. And
Hmm.
it doesn't mean that if you don't know the rules, you should be yelled at. But if you learn the rules and you're cool with it, shut up and be cool with it. Like there's this balancing act of this understanding that culture is made up of a lot of people and traditions,
Hmm.
and that somehow those traditions become the only thing that define those people. That gets you in a lot of trouble no matter what you're talking about. Across culture, across stereotyping, hatred is built on those types of things, and that's not what either of us are about. It's about opening the door and keeping things alive and hoping that they continue to thrive and evolve over time.
Hmm.
And the nuances in those things are where we can have interesting debates. But when you start talking about the ranch hands, just like you said, they might be into skateboarding or anime. That doesn't make them any less country or any less a ranch hand or any less a skateboarder or any less into anime. These are these are parts of who people are. It's part of what make up the culture. And,
Hmm.
there's value in all of it. And I think that when we get wrapped up in this idea, like, how could you possibly have country in LA? It's the most city of city places of all time. It has glitz and glamour. It's, palm trees and Botox. Yeah, that's true. But, Buck Owens recorded all of his records here. So did Merle Haggard, or most of them at least.
Yeah.
So did, Tex Ritter. I mean, like, we can go really far back. Capitol Records in Hollywood, you couldn't be more Hollywood than Capitol Records, was where most of country music was recorded. You
It was
know,
New York and LA.
New
Jimmy
York and
Rogers
LA.
was in New
Yeah,
York. That was, like, of course, he wasn't like the first recording artist, but the
no,
first radio recording. New York and LA.
that was it. And so, it goes to like how country music came about. There's a great book. I will grab it because I always do. This is like my go-to. Is Creating Country Music. It's by Richard Peterson. It's an academic book, and if you're into the history of this stuff, I highly
Hmm.
recommend this book because it's really quite interesting. And the subtitle is Fabricating Authenticity. So all of our talk about who is and isn't country, take a read of this book. And this it gets us really nicely. It's a beautiful transition. Look at this. It's like we planned it out. The There was a time when hillbilly music, which is what country music was called before it was codified as country music, and race music were the same music. It was
Hmm.
exactly the same, except white people made hillbilly music and black people made race music. It sounded the same. They used the same instruments. They sang about the same stuff. You go back to, all of these different places, all the way back to the Carter family, all the way back on either side of these stories, there was intermingling of the song creation and the song
Hmm.
discoveries that were then recorded. And then if you had an A on one or an a B on the other, one went into the hillbilly area and the other went into race music. And it's the same music. and it came from the same place, and it evolved differently because of how it was exposed and
Hmm.
what other influences came into it, of course. But at that time period, it was pretty much the same. And that's not that far back. You're talking
No,
about like the 19 teens
50s.
up to like the mid 20s until it became much more codified. And the reason it became codified was to sell it. And
Hmm.
so, it was fabricated, it was created. And so once we can be okay with that and like we are aware of what that means, then we can talk about this a little bit more organically. We can talk about how things have changed, how they've evolved, and what those things mean in today's society and in today's honky tonks, in the places where they're expected, like Fort Worth, and where they're not expected, like Los Angeles.
Hmm. And I think that's a huge thing too, is a lot of people discredit California because of our current climate. But what they don't recognize is that the Great Depression is what brought Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma all out to California. So
Mm-hmm.
technically, California took the South end first. And then through Bakersfield, that's where a lot of those guys, not all of them settled, but a lot of the musicians were settling. And without the Bakersfield sound, without Buck Owens disowning Nashville, we wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have Gillies today.
Nope.
Because what's weird, again, this is like the switch. Oh man, I feel like we could sit for an hour if also way more educated people have talked about it, but we've had this switch where like during Buck Owens, during those 50s era, like Nashville sounded more Western and the West sounded more country that we know
Yeah.
today. And then it's as though when Buck Owens was like, yeah, we're not doing this, and it switched and started going back to Texas and started hitting the honky tonks, then all of a sudden it like switched. And Nashville kind of took the Texas country that Buck Owens and the Bakersfield sound brought and switched it to that cosmopolitan sound. And then all of a sudden, 80s, 70s, 80s started growing. 80s and 90s, it just boom. Like
Yeah.
now we had all of a sudden the subgenres like we see right now. What I love most about this time is every subgenre has been represented.
Yeah.
Bluegrass is coming back, gospel is coming back, cosmopolitan country is coming back, Texas, red dirt, western, you name it. It's
Yep.
all these subgenres are getting represented so well. And I think you might want to go into genre in just a little bit, and I think genres would be good to talk about. But I just wanted to give a little credit to California as well. Of we are as a whole a nation that is agrarian. Everywhere produces something agrarian based. Even people wouldn't recognize that, like Pennsylvania is massive in agriculture, yet they're on the East Coast and we're one of the first colonies. It's like
Mm-hmm.
they've been here from the start, yet they're still deep in it. And
Yeah.
too often we get caught up, I think, in the comfort of saying my town's better than yours or I'm more country than you. And then we don't trust one another, which is one of the whole reasons we're agrarian, is that when I take off my hat and shake a woman's hand, you recognize this guy's at least worth trusting to that level. Then inside of that respect, that bubble of respect that we have inside of our culture, we can relax and we can joke with one another. And that's the point of that honky tonk, like you were saying. When you walk into someone's house and they ask you to take off your boots because you're tracking in dirt, you don't argue with them.
You just do
You
it.
want to be there. So it's like either take off your boots like they asked or leave. Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
the one being rude, you are. And
Right.
so on one side, that's what also stinks a lot of the time being a bridge that I see is on one point I have cowboys on one side that are just like line dancing has no place in the honky tonk. And I'm like, guys, I mean, technically we could accredit line dancing to historically black colleges in the 20s with stepping and strolling, but also like our popular line dances today are from the 70s with disco and the honky tonk. So it's more traditional than what you're doing right now. And then on the flip side, I have a lot of city folk who are almost trying to stretch country. So one side is trying to pull it in, and one side is trying to be like, oh, well, why can't I be country? And it's like, the way you're asking that question is wrong. It's not that, again, it's not that a skateboarder can't be country. It's the fact of if a skateboarder tries to just, it's like collecting a badge of, oh, well, now I'm country. It's like, no, 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 no. You should want to get in and learn that respect, learn that culture, and then bring it back. You know,
Yeah.
it's
It's
just,
a balancing act, and like
exactly.
that's the reality is that there is no pure culture. There just isn't.
Hmm.
Culture is about expression and interaction and influence. And if there was a pure culture, I wouldn't be in this. I wouldn't. It wouldn't make sense. Like I have no agrarian roots. I have no range roots. I'm not. I have no cowboy in me. There's nothing to it that belongs to me.
Hmm.
but I'm interested in it. And so I learned about it. And like many other things and many other people, you can learn about something. It can be part of who you are. And I have a collection of random stuff behind me, right? I got a lighter from an artist that I really like and makes music. I got an antique boot remover that my mom gave me for my birthday. I got this cowboy up on the wall that has been in my family since I was a little boy because an artist gave it to our family, and now it's here. It's part of my my background for these conversations. But that's my culture, right? That's who I am, and there's a lot of stuff back here that isn't necessarily country. I got my little league ball that I got for coaching my kids' team back here too. I got pictures of my kids. I have artifacts from work, right? That I might be wearing a blue collar here, but I sure as hell don't work a blue collar job and never did. But I did have boots for work once because I had to stand outside and talk to the media. But
Hmm.
the reality is that you don't need to fit every mold of what is expected of you to be part of this culture, right? You just need to understand what it is and respect most of it. And if you don't agree with all of it and you still want to be part of it, you got to be able to stand up in a way that is respectful and push back. Because that's where I think we will probably disagree, is that the evolution of culture is necessary for it to survive. You can't have like you this is the thing that is like the most obvious example, right?
Hmm.
Tom T. Hall is a country music legend, and he
Hmm.
got kicked out of the Opry because he didn't want to not have horns on his new album when he came to perform. He didn't get to go. He was also pretty pissed off about where everything was going with country music at the time. It was kind of the countrypolitan, jazzy disco time. He didn't like that very much, but they didn't want to have horns on the Grand Old Opry. And you know what else they didn't want before that? They didn't want drums. Can you tell me today that country music shouldn't have drums? No,
As a
you can't.
dancer, we can't even like we can barely follow anything without drums.
Right. You can't tell me that. So yeah, there was a time when it wasn't country music if it had drums. And there was a time when if it had an electric guitar, it wasn't country music. You're gonna tell me Buck Owens isn't country music? You're gonna tell me Merle
Hmm.
Haggard isn't country music? Waylon Jennings isn't country music? Tammy Wynette isn't country music? There was a time when pedal steel was like the new fangled device. Come on, like that's the most country of country instruments. Where was it made? It was developed through a whole bunch of stuff that started in Hawaii. Is that
Hmm.
country? We can keep going down this rabbit hole. Everything is going to change and evolve, but the culture itself can take things in just like you can take things in and have them become part of you. There's just such this divide between this orthodoxy and
Hmm.
Catholicism, both
Hmm.
lowercase letters, right? Where people just want to believe that it's never changed and it never will. It's like, no, of course it's going to change. But there are elements that need to be part of that. You need to
Hmm.
understand the history. You need to
Hmm.
understand where it came from to be able to understand where it should go and where it shouldn't go. Because look, and I know that your head explodes every time you see this stuff, and I kind of agree with you, though I think you may be a little bit angry about it. And like, you're young, you have a dark beard, mine's gray. In time, you too shall come back a little bit.
Thank
But
you, young grasshopper.
yes, indeed, yeah. One day, the teacher shall become the student, or whatever the expression is. Um, the reality is that the stuff matters because we say it matters, and it is only going to be valued if we value it. And I think that there's something to be said about those who are respecting the history and understanding it. But there has to be the balance there too, because people are going to want to change. People did change. The fact is, like, 15 years ago, no one would have been looking on Instagram to learn about how to dance, but now they are, and you're getting lots of people who want to learn how to do, proper progressive two-stepping through Instagram and TikTok. It just wasn't a thing before. So things are changing. Things are going to change. You need to understand where they were so
Hmm.
that they can go to a place where they work.
Yeah. And then I think that, and that's what's funny. You kind of were like, we disagree on this, but we don't disagree on what you said, the specific thing you said, because the important thing is to look back, and that's also what we're about to go into. But understanding the history of anything, you know, you and I in both of our faiths also share a lot of understanding of one another, because to even get where I am, I had to read everything that you read. Not everything, but a lot of what you read. However, our perspectives are different on it. Does that make
Mm-hmm.
one right and one wrong? Possibly. But you and I, the point is, though, we can still have mutual respect for one another. We can also still do life together. Because that was the point of these honky tonks, was to be the middle ground. The point of the honky tonk was that these, again, what's funny is city folk, but these are literally just little towns that they just set up because they were moving, westward expansion, that they didn't have to go out to the ranch. They didn't have to go out and sleep around in the fields with the cowboys. They got to come in and everyone be in one place. And that's why what was crazy was before the Civil War, we saw a lot of progressive thinking that we would think now it's like, no way, because we know what happened after,
Mm.
which that's difficult in itself. That could be a whole talk, but the same thing happened also through the 1920s. Speaking on what hillbilly and race was, it separated the two was minstrel shows, and the fact that a lot of the white folk would transfer a lot of the music over to white folk through minstrel shows, just straight copying. Not
Mm-hmm.
all of it, but the majority of it. Folk music, folk, bluegrass, and gospel are what the three bases of really, and what we still see in Appalachian. I mean, look at what I love about Muscadine Bloodline. You see a lot of the 90s artists will go and all of them have a gospel album, but Muscadine Bloodline, I think, does the perfect way of, like, in the middle of their album, they just have a hymn that just, like, boom, hits you. And most people don't
Mm-hmm.
even know it's a hymn because they're not listening to the lyrics, but it's a straight hymn. And so those three were the trinity of what built out Appalachian now, but like what country built itself on. And what's funny is folk came from working calls, so slave songs. Just to be frank, like they're slave working songs.
Mm-hmm.
Bluegrass came from also slaves, but really like the West African and Irish mix of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then gospel came from straight church in the South, which
Correct.
was black folk.
Yep.
And so it's a fact of like, we have to know our history. And that's what I don't understand too, is a lot of people will look at me trying to look backwards. Because that's the thing, is like you just said, I'm always wanting to evolve. And the thing is too, who am I? What type of fool would say like, oh, things can't change. They're going to change. I'm either going to get dragged along the bottom while the wave goes, or I can get on top and surf. And my thing is, I'm trying to surf, but like, I'm on a different wave. I'm over here like, where's everyone else at? And that's why I think I respond with such anger, is I don't see any other dancers who are trying to instruct that can even keep up in conversation. And not even that, but it's like, who's actually speaking out? Because I'll say something as basic as like, hey, closed position. And people are like, that's outdated. And I'm like, am I talking crazy right now? Like, am I dumb? And it makes me feel stupid. And therefore, I ask hard questions, like just straightforward leading questions that people won't answer. And then I'm like, okay, so this is pointless to have this conversation. And in all of it, my questions are trying to point them backwards. Because if they can't look back and say, oh, in the 80s this happened, or in the 90s this happened, and this is why I do it. If they did that, I would be silenced. I couldn't say a word. That's what happened with
Mm-hmm.
line dancing, to be honest. Someone talked to me, these old cowboys, and they tried to talk down about line dancing. I sat there and I was like, how can I defend this? I really, I know in my gut they're not right. And then I went back and I searched in the 70s, disco. Disco is what kicked off all of the line dancing. And what's funny, you want to talk about Tom T. Hall? I have a hot take that Ronnie Milsap, love him to death. If he would have dropped today, he wouldn't be country.
No, no. There's a
There's a
lot of
lot of
people who would have
artists like
dropped
that.
today who would have fallen. And I would argue there are a lot of artists that are out today that are being considered country that in 20 years will be seen as pop or hip hop adjacent artists. We don't need to talk about them because I don't
No.
like them very much. But I
Yeah.
think here's my hot take on that. If you like that music and you think it's country, good for you. I'm not going.
Mhm.
I am. I'm. I. There was a time when I would have fought somebody about saying, Morgan Wallen was country. It's like, okay, fine, he's country. I don't like his music. I don't like him. I think he's a bad person. I also think his music sucks. But that's not. It's not for me to decide what you like and what you want to do. If you want to come and put, some of his more, trap beat, hip hop styled country music on at my party or at the bar that I want to go hang out and listen to, what I think of as good country music, I'm going to be offended by it. But that's why I also put in $20 into the jukebox and, put 10 songs on and, piss people off because that's fun. And I get to listen to the music I want to listen to. And like, that's the thing. It's like, this is about, at its core, this is entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at its core, this is the entertainment aspect of the culture that we're talking about: the honky tonk, the dancing, the music, the hanging out. Like you have other lines of thought and into the agrarian aspects of culture
Yeah.
and the work and all of that. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't touch that because it's not mine to touch.
Yeah.
The music and entertainment part is mine. It's what I like to do. I like the music. It tells good stories. It's American. It's fun. It's progressive, it's conservative. There's a lot going on across the country music space, and there's a lot to talk about. But I'm not going to tell you what you should like. That's up to you. And
Yes.
if you want to go do something else, that's fine. But like, don't call it what I like. Don't degrade what I'm saying is enjoyable because what you like isn't what I like. That's for little kids. I mean, we're talking about a different set of things here. We're talking about how cultures can evolve, how art can influence those cultures, how art can influence power.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of different things. And I think I listened to something earlier today on the radio, and they were interviewing Ramel Ross, who's this Oscar-nominated documentarian and filmmaker and community guy who's just like, does really interesting educational actions, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a professor. He's really big thinking dude. And his Oscar nominated screenplay, or sorry, his Oscar nominated documentary is called Hale County. And he was writing the story about Hale County at some other point in time. He's a black man who was in the South, and he was writing about Hale County, what he thought was the best restaurant, what he thought was the coolest place. And people were like, "I'm from Hale County. I don't see that as the case. Like, I think this place is the most beautiful scenery, and this is the best place to get the good sandwich in town." What was the division? It was race in that particular divide. But you can't talk in absolutes. You can't own the experience because everyone experiences the same thing differently. Your experience and my experience at the same concert will be wildly different. Your experience and my experience in the same dance hall will be wildly different. If I dance with the same woman that you danced with, I'm going to have a different experience. I'm going to have a different conversation. I'm going to take different things from that. When we start talking in absolutes, we lose any standing. Because if you say this is 100% true, it better be about science or engineering or math, because otherwise there is no absolute true in culture. Stuff can be bad in culture, don't get me wrong. Racism is bad.
Taking notes. Okay.
Excluding people because you don't like who they are, how they believe, who they love, all that stuff. That's bad. That doesn't mean that it's absolutely one way or the other. So that there's difference in that. And I think when we go away from absolutism or totality, any of these like full encompassing ideas, we're much better off for it. We learn much more. And that to me that's where I think our approaches are a little different, because you really do believe that there are some things you just can't do with the honky tonk. I think you could do them, but you probably shouldn't. You should probably get told not to do them, and you should probably go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know how to do that. Oh, my bad." And then you move on. If you don't know, you can't change. And if you're not willing to let people be wrong, they're never going to learn either. So there's this weird balancing act. And I think when we start talking bigger picture things, ideas and concepts, when we start being absolute about it, like all Morgan Wallen songs suck, which is not true. I mean, there are a couple real good bangers out there, and I'm admitting that. My name is Donnie Cutler, and I admit that there are some good Morgan Wallen songs. Most of them aren't very good. Just have to get that out there. But that's my point, is that when you go big like this and you go all of it. You're ignoring the nuances of the people. You're ignoring the skateboarder. You're ignoring the anime fan. You're ignoring the ranch hand who wants nothing to do with country music. So that's really what it's about.
Yeah, and that's the hard part too, is when I'm trying to make room for other people. For example, when people try to, like, as soon as someone brings up anyone, but specifically we're on the topic of Morgan Wallen, and they're like, this person isn't country. First thing I'm always saying is, what is country? What is country? Because again, I try to explain to people that some of my fondest memories of back home, less than 3,000 people. I grew up with, we were the only mascots who were hillbillies, one of two in the nation, right? I'm as country as it gets. Like, I was 10 minutes outside of town, born on the ranch. Like, yet my fondest memories were listening to 50 Cent after football practice. My brother and I would drive home in our green F-150 and we bumped 50 Cent. Like, that's what's funny. I didn't like country music growing up. My parents did not raise me on country music, right? Everything we did was mainly around gospel music. Like, it was no secular music. We got to listen to some Hank Jr., as we were at family reunions. But besides that, I didn't get much exposure. But what I did get is character. And what I did get is values. I got traditional ways of thinking. And when I talk to other traditional people and I try to explain to them, you have to make space for Morgan Wallen or he's going to overflow into everything else. And that's what we consistently see happening, is the pin that we're like, people are trying to gatekeep. I'm trying to build pins for these people, aka things like alternative country. Anyone can fit in that. You want to be country? You want to throw a banjo on a rap track? Come on. Like, we'll have you. We'll have you. Because what people don't know too, things like angst. Would you believe me, and I think it's too, I can defend it. Angst music, like rock, is the strongest it's ever been inside a country. I don't see a scene outside a country, but like the Co-Wetzel Red Dirt rock movement, angst is it's thriving in the country scene. But outside of it, I see it going, like the angst scene kind of went towards like pop or metal. It didn't really stay there, but we are grungy as hell in our country scenes. Guys showing up in Vans and ripped jeans, and there's wearing their My Chemical Romance shirts, and they're wearing their redneck hats with a dip in, but they're just going down to some like hard angsty music. And that's what's crazy, is like, that's the point of art. Same thing with dance. Like, I never tell people this is the only way to two-step. What I do tell them is I show them the history and I say, this is where it started. Okay. Now, some people went this direction, some people went this direction. This is why I teach it. The same way with your, like the interview about what's the best shop in town, Yeah. If they, though, are trying to say, oh, you're wrong because I like this place, what's the point of the conversation? But if Correct. They can say, oh, I went to here and I went to here, this place has lower prices, better options, and their customer service is better, and this place, this, and this, that's an actual discussion. Too often, though, people say, oh, well, I like this and I like this. I mean, Kendrick's performance. People saw, I don't like this, a.k.a. bad entertainment. Instead, did he have good production? Yes.
Yeah.
Was there clearly a message that some people didn't understand? Yes. Did he perform it live? That's a thing, too. Yes. And so on that, too, you were going to say something, but I'm also curious, like, how would you, when you're out at that bar, you want it like the Honky Tonk, we'll make, not a bar, the Honky Tonk, dance hall, or the saloon. What is separating when you're saying, or the expectations I guess you have, when people are like, hey, you want to go country dancing, or do you want to go out to the saloon, or do you want to go listen to this Honky Tonk band? What are your expectations when you go into that? And when do those expectations, when they're not met, what do you kind of like classify? What do you, because you're also like me, you're also trying to still make space and like understand this person and why this is entertainment. Because clearly people find Morgan Wallen entertaining. So what do you kind of do with that when people will bring you to a place and you're like, ooh?
I mean, it really depends, right? And I think that it depends on the relationship you have with the person. And again, it goes back to people being all these different elements, right?
Yeah.
I have friends who are 100% outside of the country scene. They have no interest in it. And then they say, oh, you're into country music. Oh, my dad listened to Buck Owens. Or, my dad was a huge Waylon Jennings fan. Or, more often than not, I like Willie Nelson because he smokes weed. And I was like, let me tell you some things.
We're about to blow your mind.
Yeah, I'm going to blow your mind. There are a lot of folks who smoke a lot of weed in the country music scene and always have. all the way back. And so it's like, and also we can go harder if you want. But usually what it'll be is, oh, that's great. What are you into? Because I want to hear what they say. And if they come back with like, oh, I don't know, Miranda Lambert. I really like Miranda Lambert. Then I know that we can talk about Texas country, and I know we can talk about some of the more esoteric aspects of songwriting and development and things like that. And the song structure and storylines, because all of Miranda Lambert's songs are story songs, and there are big picture concept albums and all the things that go into great country music. If they come back and say, I really like Jelly Roll, I have a harder time. And I say, why do you like him? And, it'll go from everything from I really like the sound, I like the music, or to, I like his story. And if I get I like his story, I know I can go in other directions, right? And I talk to these people about exploring different types of country music. One of the things I love doing in that type of a situation is saying, like, tell me what you listen to now, and I can tell you a country artist that you'll probably like. And, sometimes it ends up being much more poppy, but gateway drug, right? And a lot of times it's, oh, I'm really into, I don't know, just weird storylines, right? I'd be like, well, I got great weird storylines for you. I got great, blended sounds. Like, let's talk about Charlie Crockett. I mean, that guy's playing on a different level. He's making music that is beyond genre, and it's beautiful, and it's fun, and it's country, and you can dance to that. He's done a lot of great stuff. And usually I say you should listen to Turnpike Troubadours, because that is, I had my entry drug. They were my first freebase. I mean, they hit me hard because the writing.
Turnpike. That's not an entry drug, brother. That's, you dove in deep.
No,
you were
that was
down in there.
It's like I am like the Dare kid. They're like, you have one puff of that cigarette, you're gonna be doing heroin. That's kind of what happened to me.
You're like, forget the Marlboro. I'm going straight for the spoon, brother.
I'm gonna roll it up myself. But to me, like, they are the pinnacle of a band, of a country music band. And from there, I went even deeper, right? And so I can talk about the full range of what is contemporary country music with people who don't speak this language, in parts because, like, I have other interests too. I have other musical interests that I like. And, it's being able to talk to people about it. Like, what I expect is to know a lot about what's going on. And if it seems familiar or even is remotely familiar, I'm going to be comfortable in those scenarios. And even if it's really uncomfortable, like I am the only person in there who does not look the part, I know that I'll be fine because I'm going to go in and approach it in a way that is respectful. I'm also, a white man. I'm not going to be, harassed as a woman or questioned why I'm there as a person of color. I'm not worried about my physical safety. And I'm also not going to pick a fight with some, drunk redneck about who is and who isn't country, because I'm too old for that shit. And, that to me is what I've learned from this is, like, there are great places in LA. There are great places in Bakersfield that I will go and happily shoot the shit with the old guys and, talk about specific things and not bring up certain artists because it's just not worth it. In the same way that I'm talking with, friends of mine who are like, oh, I Garth Brooks, right? Yeah, country music, Garth Brooks. And I was like, yeah, Garth Brooks is part of the country music, universe, but he was a pop star and always will be and is an incredible performer. Saw him live. One of the coolest shows I've ever seen. It was wildly entertaining. But it's its own thing. And, it's not the only thing. And I think that's my expectation, right? When I go into a place and someone's like, hey, this is a country bar, I kind of expect country music. I'm sometimes frustrated when it isn't. Sometimes I don't care. But I'm also not going to get completely bent out of shape that, there's line dancing going on. I hate line dancing. I don't like doing it. It's not for me. But if you want to do it, go ahead. Like, I don't care. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be pulled into it. I get it. We're going to do a kickball change. We're going to turn to the left, and then we're going to do it again. I get it. It's not that complicated, folks. Woo! All right, we'll do some other mixing. We'll spin to the left. We'll spin to the right. We'll shake
Yeah.
our asses. I got you. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Love it.
It's not for me. It's boring,
Nah.
and I'd rather listen to the music than line dance. Um,
Hmm.
but that's a digression. My point is mostly about knowing your environment, knowing who you're talking to, and respecting them as individuals,
Hmm.
as opposed to them being some like blob of, I'm country, you're not.
Yeah. Like how much percentage of country you are.
I mean, I can put on an accent, I can play the game. I got Wranglers and like '90s vintage T-shirt button downs upstairs. I got a Stetson. I got nice ass boots that fit and are scuffed in the right ways and are shined the right ways. I could walk down the street in any town in America and people would think I was country as fuck. But I live
Hmm.
in the suburbs of Los Angeles. You know why? Because I do. And
Hmm.
no one else is going to question that in any other place. But I like putting myself out there so that it can be some sort of, a way for people to learn a little bit about both sides of this coin. You know, I'm not going to get on the soapbox about where we are right now as a nation,
Hmm.
but there's a lot that can be done and should be done to protect who we are, against certain forces that are trying to change who we are.
Hmm.
You interpret that any way you want, folks. And come read my stuff and you'll know exactly what I mean. We can fight about it there, but not here. Like that to me is the most pressing thing that we need to figure out is human respect. Like there are people who are making this music who are part of this culture that don't fit the mold of what you expect it to be. You being those who are in it, you being those who see it as something else.
Hmm.
Take a second and learn a little bit about what it is now, what it was before, and where it can go.
Yeah. So that's what you lead us perfectly into why we did all this. On one side, I think it's very important to recognize knowledge is vital, but also knowledge and skill is not how we compare ourselves. Because if this is just a game of, if it's just a dick measuring contest, everyone's going to lose to someone. And so on one side, we have people who are trying like to just educate themselves and be able to outsmart other people or hold a conversation and know more. Like, oh, you don't know this person? It's like, okay, step aside. Then there's
Mm-hmm.
also people who almost are not, it's not weaponizing competence because that's a completed topic, but it's the guys who like, they are country. They were born and raised there, that they know their stuff, but also not know their stuff, but they live that. But yet they really only know like the stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're talking about too with our country, fear is the biggest problem we have right now because identity, like we don't feel we can step outside of our box and still maintain ourselves. We feel the need to almost be in this herd so that we feel comfortable. This is nothing new. There's never nothing new under the sun. But social media has amplified it and brought a lot of light on it, and it's almost making us more fearful. It's the same way with anyone who's listening to faith. You should never just be in your group. You should always be seeking to be outside your group so that you can represent that group and welcome that group that you're in right now into your original group, you know? And that's why I think I get so ticked off. And I think that's what you were talking about and why you see my anger is because credit is not given where credit's due. And I'm specifically calling out instructors and businesses. If you're benefiting off of this and you know what you're doing, that's what pisses me off when people use the term honky tonk and they're just kind of, like, again, like in LA, some people just want to throw on, their neon cowboy hat, some chaps, and look sexy and jump. I don't care. I genuinely, no one is going to that specific party and like that. But there's specific honky tonks in LA. When they say we're throwing a party, people have expectations. In
Correct.
Texas, everywhere can be a honky tonk technically. If they have a dance floor and a place to drink, that's fine. But if you're trying to say you're like the biggest honky tonk or you're the best or blah, 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 and I go in and you're 60-40 hip hop to country, and the country you play is 15 to 20 years old, and also all of it's just two-stepping, you're gonna kind of rub me the wrong way, especially when I try to talk to you and you make me feel out of place. When you make
Yeah.
me feel stupid, like that's only going to push me more because now it's like now you're appropriating a culture that inside of this culture we're still appropriating it because like we started out this conversation and it's about to go into a direction, and before we go into this I want people to know, yeah, We're two white dudes. This is not a virtue signaling conversation where we're like, blah, 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 we know more than you. This is an opportunity for us to undo what our generations before worked hard to twist in and keep people out. And we hope that one day we're not having to preface this conversation at all, but credit where credit is due matters. And so we have to turn back, and we also have to talk now about what's going on. And all of it is in celebration of Frederick Douglass's birthday, which technically isn't this week. We don't even know when it is because shout out slavery. You didn't take documentation of Frederick Douglass, who was massive in the abolitionist movement, but we just know he was born in February. So we're going to celebrate it this month, which is actually tomorrow. Will be his birthday, the 14th, which normally is on a Thursday, but it's on a Friday this year. So this is why we're doing it. And so the credit where credit is due, as you've heard, the big three influences we've had in country music as a whole is, I would say, and you did, Donnie, take me where you're at, Hawaiian, because of the steel guitar, the banjo from West Africa, and the fiddle from Ireland, which I would say, which a lot of people can argue too, that West Africa also brought the fiddle. However, in the style that we play it, it definitely resembles more Irish. And what's crazy is in every single one of those cultures, we at one point had colonized or somehow had some type of occupation where they worked for, I'm not going to speak about race because there was race in a lot of it. In the end, people were oppressed and we benefited from it. That's how country music really started. And yes, in that, there's also what I like to speak about because a lot of people don't, and I said it at the start, is the beauty that in that oppression, there was certain places that now people would still say they're sundown towns. There was progression until something changed, and then some of the most atrocious things happened in those areas. And now we've just kind of overlooked them. And those are those guys I'm talking about, like my hometown, where guys were raised to think that the Civil War was over state rights. And that is still, even when I was 14 in my hometown, I still studied history enough to ask, continue that statement. State rights.
For what?
State rights. Yes, to own another man. And yes, we can always try to scapegoat this shit, but being a man means taking responsibility. And the honky tonk, the beautiful thing, especially with art, we get art. We get to celebrate and mourn. And you can only mourn as deeply as you celebrate, and you can only celebrate as deeply as you can mourn. And therefore, we just want to take some time to recognize our past. And also, really, I want to bring delight to a lot of great artists that Donnie's going to help me with to bring attention to them because they're doing great things right now. And I would imagine a lot of our listeners already hear them. But if you don't, take some time, add them to your playlist, look into them because we're not doing this again. This is not virtue signaling or patronizing in any sense. These people are skilled, extremely skilled. And honestly, too, they don't need our help. We are willingly giving it to them. So,
I mean, I think,
Donnie, walk me through it.
Honestly, I think, we're talking about a range of Black country artists here in honor of Frederick Douglass's birthday, Black History Month, and the realities that Black folks were instrumental, no pun intended, in the creation of country music. You needed Black folks to do it. You needed the white folks to do it together. There was no way that they developed outside of each other, and the music is richer for it, and we're better off for acknowledging it. It doesn't change who we are. This isn't. It's as the T-shirt says, equality isn't a pie, man. It's not a zero-sum game. Providing a platform for other folks to shine through is fantastic. And one person that just has always jumped off the playlist, off the music for me when I've been listening to kind of that 90s revivalist space is Aaron Vance. I really love his sound. I really like it a lot. He's got an interesting range. The three songs that I would point out to people to just give yourself a little taste would be Outlaw Jones, which is a classic style of country music where you do name drops and you use the names in different funny ways. It's fantastic. And he just wants to go and party at the Honky Tonk, and that's what that's about. And it's good times. Hold Out is a little bit more of this rock adjacent, hip hop influenced song about I've been country the whole damn time. Where have you been? And the song and the words are so clearly part of the pantheon of current country music. It's important. It's a good song. It should be on the radio. And then my favorite, kind of more poignant one is called $5. And it's a song about Lincoln, right? It's about what would Lincoln do if he was here right now? Would he, he would probably shake your hand and talk to you about your boss. He thinks that you should be equal. He thinks that we should be talking about the character of people as opposed to the color of their skin. And the fact of the matter is, we still are doing all of these things, and we need to be, because we need to be honest about what it is. And the song, all three of those songs present, different parts of Vance's portfolio of music, and they're great. They're good songs. I mean, but they're very much modern pieces of art and of music, and almost more importantly in this, entertainment. They're fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like good, fun music. And he's a black man making it. He's making country ass music, and it is good. He's from Mississippi. He's been doing it his whole musical career. It's like it's just so danceable. It's just so much fun, and it just is. There's no more to it, and no less to it either. It's just part of the country music pantheon, and I think that's important. Kind of flipping the script, though, I would point listeners to Our Native Daughters as well. That is just this super group of foundational country roots music put together by Rhiannon Gideons, who's of the Carolina Chocolate Drops originally, also like of every other group ever.
Yes.
Highly decorated, incredibly smart, a musical genius, a lyrical genius, and just an all-around just badass individual. And her music is beautiful. It pulls absolutely no punches about our history and where the music came from and what American history did to people of color and black people and black women. It's an important part of this. And, Leela McCann, Allison Russell, also of Poe Girls and Birds of Chicago, and her own work. Her music is beautiful, very powerful. She's Canadian, also making country music as a black woman, as a Canadian. Kind of fun, mind-blowing things here. And then Amethyst Kia, who I think is probably one of the most underrated songwriters who's out there. And this is a fucking super group, right? They put out an album. A while ago, a long time ago, on Smithsonian Records, on the Smithsonian imprint, about African roots. But it's country. It is a country album, and I highly recommend that one. It's really great. I like them a lot, and I think that that album really helped shape a lot of my understanding of where black music intersects with country music, and where black music intersects with what is perceived as white music. And those two things are different. And I say them that way intentionally, is that things are seen as white music, but they aren't. It's part of a bigger conversation. And they also are white music, because there is cultural expression. There is expectation of certain things within every community. And I think that that's fine. And I think that if you're honest about it, it doesn't make you a racist. It doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you aware of where the music's coming from. And the same thing with black music. There is a tradition of black music that ranges genre, that has to do with the black experience in America. And that is important and was foundational to country music. And as soon as we're cool with that, we're going to be much better for it. So I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep pushing people to do this, because it is so critical. I'm going to give you two more. One, I'm going to go with Rashad, which is spelled RVSHVD, for those people who might be looking him up and going, I don't understand how this works. He's got a lot of hip hop in his sound, a lot of trap music in his sound. Fine. That's not what I'm super into. The two songs that I like, the newest one that just came out is Dope Boy. Damn, is that fun. It's just fun. It's just fun. Good. It's just like, it is. There's all sorts of snarky ass lyrics in it that are fun. Just a good damn song. You want to dance to it. You want to, you just bop into it, because it's a country bop. I mean, like, that's just, there's no other way to do it, to describe it. It is just fun. It's silly. It's about selling drugs and having money and getting the good car and the girls and all the stuff that you want from, the bro country adjacent area. but with a much better sound. It is so good, and I love the song. And it came on. I learned about it through Don't Rock the Inbox, the great Substack from Natalie Weiner and Marissa Moss. It's just like a great song. And then the other one of his that I really like a lot is Shoebox Money, which any kid can associate with that and understand that, like, you're saving up for something that you want at the end of the summer. You're going to spend all that money that you got in your allowance, you got, raking up leaves during the fall, whatever it is, to go get that absolutely unnecessary piece of equipment that you want. And it's just a fun ass song, and it's super, super, super fun. And I really like it. And so, I think that people should be dancing to those songs, get those into the line dance circuit, if that's what you're into. I mean, like, there's more to these songs, that there's more out there that we can be doing to not only platform, but just listen to more stuff and enjoy more of what the country music could be. And my last one is a personal friend of mine. She lives here in LA, Serafia. She is just so good. It's so good. It's a little jazz. She has a lot of jazz in her. She has a lot of classic vocal training, but this jazz infusion of her jazz infused country is like what I would describe her music as. And her new stuff has so much heavy pedal steel, and her vocal range is just unbelievable. And she's talking about love, pain, family, dealing with being who you are and finding the way to express that. Those are some country ass themes, and the songs are country. I would say, if you're going to go listen to a couple of her songs, Cowboy, Do You Remember has one of the best pedal steel like backings that you'll ever hear. It's haunting. It's fucking great. And then Passenger Side from the Flower District studio sessions. Whoo, you're going to church. I don't care. I'm Jewish. I don't go to church, but you're going to go to church with that particular song. And you like, there's like that organ at the beginning. You're like, so good, so good. And she just comes in and with nuanced, reserved power that she could just blow the windows out, and she doesn't. And it's just so, so good. And these are artists who are representing a range of country music expression. And you would look at them and possibly think, oh, they don't belong here because they're black.
Yeah.
But they're making country music. They've made a choice to make country music. That's how they're expressing their artistic vision. And they're just as country as anybody else who's making country music. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, I think is the most important message that we can give in any time, is that you don't look country. You don't look country. You don't act country. You are country. And if you want that, you want to be part of that, then you do it. You express things, you learn things, you listen to things, you enjoy things, you consume things in a certain way. But that doesn't mean that someone else who is consuming these things differently, engaging with them differently, but still is coming to it with that intention, they aren't any less than you are. And to me, that's where this all comes down to. It's like figuring out those boundaries, understanding where they come from, those types of things. It's real important.
Yeah.
And we need to be welcoming. We need to be willing to defend and explain ourselves. But we also have to be open enough to understand that they might not do everything the way we want them to. Anybody. But if they're interested in what we're talking about, let's talk. Yeah. Let's talk. Let's grab a whiskey. Let's dance around a little bit. You want to do it in a line, you do it over there. I'll go in a circle over this side. But we're going to do it together. And I think American country music, and country music globally, but American cultural country music doesn't belong to one person. The West doesn't belong to one person. The South doesn't belong to one person, or one type of people, or one kind of people, or one religion, or one race, creed, gender, whatever. It's all of ours. We have equal right to it. And you can go and claim it how you want, as long as you're respectful, you're willing, and you want it. Like, just come in and do it. Like, I love this stuff, and I didn't grow up with it, and I feel I'm just as country as anyone else. when it comes to it. So, we have different ideas about stuff, but we're going to come together and enjoy it.
Exactly. And see, that's what, when you said, well, Jean Carter, you care more about, the agrarian side, and I don't necessarily know that. And that's what's funny is like, there are certain people, like there's people who are deeper in it than me. Like, again, someone's always going to be more knowledgeable, more passionate, more blah, blah, blah. But in the end, why I love the honky tonk so much and why I'm defending it is it's that meeting place. It's a rally point for all of us to meet where you don't have to worry about what's going on outside of the honky tonk. If you show up and you carry on their tradition, you're supporting farmers and ranchers. And until farmers and ranchers die out as a breed, which that's a different discussion, then we still have living tradition. I still claim it, and no one's been able to give me another like culture, but we're the last living traditional dances. Every other traditional dance you see in Germany and Lithuania, and even in Latin America with Mexico, people aren't wearing those traditional things when they're doing those jobs. So the traditional styles might have came from vaqueros, but vaqueros don't wear the things that they wear when they do the traditional things, which they're still going crazy right now. Those competitions they have, like nationals, are blowing up. They're huge. But the way they dress, women aren't walking down the street in big flowery dresses with the big flower on their head. But when they do traditional, fachada, when they do traditional norteñas, or now and even in Tejano, like Tejano, the clear difference between norteñas and Tejano can still wear the classic cowboy hat, pearl snap and look normal to us as anyone in the U.S., but really Texans. That's walking down the street, no problem. But as soon as you cross the border and you get to norteñas, when they do traditional things, it doesn't look today. It doesn't look current. And that's because at a certain point it died, right? We have the beautiful thing that our honky tonks consistently grow. And that's why in a time where we are so lost, we just have to look backwards. And that's the thing is too, sometimes we have to face it. And I think the big thing you said where I hope people clinched up and I hope they can relax now, that it's not racist to not know these things. You're not racist if you're not educated. It's when you take that and you pass on the responsibility to somewhere else.
Right.
Now you're pushing it. And when that turns into also actions where you're like, oh, they're not country, they're not this. Okay, now you're making prejudice statements that can be very racist because you're letting prejudice determine your actions. And that's not okay. Yeah. And in the end, when we do turn backwards and we look, we're able to then also welcome the fact that I would also like to say that on the flip side, I'm not going to determine what term we can use towards it, but I had a whole episode last year on Juneteenth with my buddy who's a cowboy, and he's not white. And it's his experience, which is anecdotal, but in the end, he always said he never really received judgment inside the honky tonk. It was from his own family, outside of his immediate family that cowboyed, that looked in and kind of didn't recognize the same way. They didn't know we had black rodeos. They didn't know about William Pickett in a sense, who started bulldogging. They also weren't educated on the outside about us, so they felt uncomfortable coming into the honky tonk. So both sides have their wrongs. The issue, though, is that both sides need to come together. And the honky tonk is always welcoming. It's always there for us. And so everyone just needs to relax. And the beautiful thing is that we have space for everyone. We just got to respect those spaces. And too many people like line dancers, not just line dancers, because most of the time right now, everyone line dances in country swings. That's what you do. And that's all they know. The problem, those don't allow space for other people. They don't allow space for other music. They don't allow space for much learning. You learn quickly, and then you're kind of just thrown, right?
Yeah.
When we create that space, like as simple as etiquette on a dance floor, man, it allows for everyone to come in. And that's what I hope, too, is that people can connect with even people, going back to the people you mentioned. Rashad, if you listen to Rashad, I dare you to not hear Papa Loves Mama when you listen to Shoebox, right?
Yeah.
Also listen to people like Yola. Yola, I think all of her work with the High Women were incredible. I think all the work with the High Women did were incredible. Just to listen, also be challenged. You don't have to agree. I don't agree with with like a quarter of what the High Women said or how they presented it too. That's a big thing too, is presentation. Am I their sole listener? No one cares. You know what it did? It opened me up though to also go listen to what they were saying, you know? Same thing with, I think Cassius Culpepper is bringing in a great modern sound, yet sounds extremely traditional. It's like he listened to the same song that someone like Coulter Wall might have heard, and he just had a different take on it, you know? Also, I would say Chapel Hart, same thing. They sound extremely 80s, 70s, 80s, like vocalist meets a guitar out in New Mexico. And they just
Yeah.
bring in a lot of power to what they're saying with a very gentle hand, you
Yeah.
know? So I love what they bring, and I hope that both sides recognize that, like, you're both welcome. However, we both, like, we really have to step it up. Really, instructors. I don't see that honky tonk goers need to do any extra work. You're there to
Yeah.
have fun. Come out, like you're saying, hey, grab a whiskey, sit down with me, let's hang out, let's talk. It's really the instructors. Take that
Yeah.
extra 5 minutes and study someone. Study
Yeah.
an artist and throw them and purposefully play a song.
Yeah. And what I'd say, I mean, you said a lot. And I think just to kind of wrap a couple of things,
Yes.
a lot of this has to do with power dynamics. And a lot of this has to do with who's in charge of what and where.
Mm-hmm.
And when the people who are in charge are willing to take risks, like bringing in a different type of song, like bringing in new music, like bringing in music of people who don't look the part, right? You're taking a risk and you're using your power to do that. The living culture point, and then we can wrap it all up. But I can't let this one go,
Yes.
because this one I think is important. Is that it goes to what I was saying about separating yourself. When here in Los Angeles, like if I'm wearing a pearl strap shirt with the embroidery and the different experiences and like fringe or whatever, people look at me differently. They think of me differently than if I did that in Texas, or I just wore normal kind of Texas adjacent country clothing, or in Arizona, or in New Mexico, or Colorado, or any of these places where this is, normal, right? It evolves, right? The traditional agrarian style clothing that you would say that you wear a lot of overalls. It's not really modern. That's not really what a lot of people are wearing outside of the work environment, right? They're wearing pants, they're wearing jeans, they're wearing a belt. Where did the clothing go? It evolved, it shifted. And when we go and make the presentation of trying to engage with our culture and do it in a way that is inclusive, we wear certain garb. We make certain choices about which hat we're going to put on. I thought about what hat to wear today. You probably thought about what hat to wear today. We're making conscious choices of how we're presenting ourselves in these situations. Does it mean that if you're wearing the most elaborate, dress or lederhosen or hair do? I don't really talk much about hairdos. I'm bald for those who are just listening. You're making choices across all of these things, and all of these choices have to do with power dynamics. And when you're aware of that, when you're making these choices consciously, no matter where you fall, either in the I don't really care about the culture side of things, or the I am going to keep these bastards out of my place because they're not doing what I want level, or anywhere in between, if you're coming to it with intention, you understand why you're wearing pearl snaps, why you're putting on a bolo tie, why you're shining your leather bottom boots, why you're not, then it's fine. I think that to me is the important part, is this intention with what you're wearing, the choices you're making, the music you're listening to, the dances you're doing, or the way you're presenting information to people. All of those choices have to do with power. All of those choices have to do with differentiation and showing respect.
That's why I brought you on. That's actually one of the thoughts I was trying to finish, and you took it right from me, and I love that, because intention and also knowledge. Again, the same way we talked about those restaurants. I don't care if you decide, like people right now who want to wear flip-flops and gym wear to the honky tonk, if you can tell me how that's country, guess what? I have to shut my mouth. If you can somehow connect that to Loretta Lynn, or somehow tell me about DeFord Bailey with your flip-flops, cool. If somehow you can tie it all the way back, then no one can do it. But if you're just doing it because of comfort and you think that a culture should conform to you because you're now in this place, then you are disrespecting and you're not putting intention, and you're not making
That's
good
fair.
choices. And so
and that's a fair and good point. And I think that, look, you wouldn't show up to the symphony wearing shorts and a t-shirt, but you could show up to the symphony wearing boots. And
mhm,
I think that there's just a level of respect that
mhm,
you should have no matter where you're going and what you're doing. You should show
mhm,
up looking good. And
yeah.
what looking good means does change from culture to culture, but still. Anyhow, yeah,
Again, the hat doesn't make the cowboy, but also you can tell a lot about a cowboy by his hat. And so that's the only thing we're trying to bring to people is, recognize the work that's put in. And so if anyone is looking though to you to try to hear more of those thoughts, because I think, like, again, what I said, the whole reason I brought you in is your perspective. Where can they find that any of your social medias and your websites? Where can they hear more from you?
sure. Well, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Country Cutler there. I'm also on Blue Sky as the same Country Cutler, and on Threads. Threads is pretty much the same thing as my Instagram. So if you follow me on Instagram, it's going to be more dynamic. But I'm also on Blue Sky as Country Cutler, and then you can subscribe to my Substack at countrycutler.substack.com. And I'd love to have you there. Come argue with me about all of these things. Come tell me that you don't have an inferiority complex, but really argue hard about that because it'll really convince me for all you Texans. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was a good conversation. It was a fun way to spend a little bit of this afternoon. And thank you for letting me share some of my thoughts and, to celebrate a little bit of Black History Month by talking a little
Mhm.
bit about history itself. So I had a great time.
Pleasure is all mine. And I just want everyone listening to remember that we talk about these things because culture matters, because you matter. Make choices because your choices are power. So always choose country. And until next time, keep honky tonks country.
Take care.